Hello, my lovelies. Today, we're wrapping up our series about parenting by personality. And this week, we're talking about the highly inquisitive, cautious child. This is the child that strives for perfection, who can become quite agitated when things don't go as planned, but who can also do extraordinary things in this world when they learn that failing is not failure and it's part of the journey. Not an easy task, to be sure, but it can be done. Before we dive in, I want to make clear that what I'm about to share are personal experiences from my life and what I learned along the way. Your situation may be different, and this is no substitute for medical or mental health intervention, especially if your situation warrants it. This podcast series is designed to help parents understand themselves and their children better based on their personalities. It's not intended to diagnose or treat any mental or physical condition. If you suspect you or a family member is at risk of physical or mental harm, please seek proper medical help immediately. For those who are new to the podcast, when I talk about personalities, communication, and relationships, I use the DISC personality model of behavior and refer to people as D or driven, I or inspired, S or supportive, and C or cautious. You can find links to take your own personality assessment in the show notes. Now, let's talk about the cautious, highly inquisitive child. These children are reserved and task-oriented. Unlike the chaotic nature of many children, these children actually enjoy order. And after a bit of training when they're young, they happily put things away because a tidy, organized space makes them feel safe and happy. In many families, there will be children who are chaotic with their toys and rooms, yet this child stays organized. In fact, the most stressful thing for them is to share a room with a sibling that is untidy and disorganized. But comparing them with their less tidy counterparts is an exercise in futility because most of the other personality types do not even aspire to the level of organization of the cautious, inquisitive child. The cautious child may not tell you outright that they're stressed by a mess, but there will be signs from mild frustration to a full-blown meltdown if things are messy and disorganized, or if someone messes something up that they have already created. If you have a toddler that melts down in the middle of a room full of toys for seemingly no reason, that could be your sign that you have a cautious, inquisitive child that is overwhelmed. At older ages, they may react strongly to a sibling that draws on their paper, or touches their food, or leaves a mess in a shared bedroom. Because that's not my personality type, I didn't see this in my own children until my mother-in-law suggested that I limit the number of toys my children could play with. When my husband and his siblings were younger, my mother-in-law would only have a few toys each for her children to play with. She had bins of toys that she would switch out every few months, and the play never got old, even when the toys came out for the third or the fourth time. Honestly, I thought it was silly at the time she told me, but I was amazed at how well it worked with my children and how much easier the messes were to clean up when we had a limited number of toys. In our house, our children loved to build things, so we always had some type of blocks, Legos, or those cardboard bricks that seemed so simple, but seemed to spur children's imaginations. And that may be one of the best gifts I ever purchased for my own grandchildren. And I have my mother-in-law to thank for that, for introducing me to those amazing toys and ideas. If you have children or grandchildren who are chaotic, try these ideas and see what happens. You might be delightfully surprised. And I put the link for the blocks in the show notes because I honestly believe every child should have access to at least one set of the blocks. Last weekend, my 5.5-year-old granddaughter furnished, in air quotes, her pretend home with the blocks and built herself a swimming pool with them as well. Her 10-month-old brother had great fun knocking down towers of those very same blocks. But anyway, a few other things that are important to know about the cautious, highly inquisitive child. They are not huge fans of surprises because it makes them anxious. They much prefer to know what to expect, and the more detail you give them, the better. They're gifted thinkers and are great at analyzing. If they're more toward the task side, they love data and understanding the workings of things. If they've got more people orientation in their personality mix, they enjoy figuring out why people do what they do, whether as an academic exercise or maybe even as an eventual profession. These children aspire to excellence and rarely take anyone's word for anything without some way to validate it. Hence the inquisitiveness, right? They're generally risk averse, especially if it involves going against the rules, unless they think the rules are stupid, in which case they will ignore them or complain about them until they get the input they need as to why the rules are the way they are. While mostly risk averse, if they have the D personality trait in their mix, they will take calculated risks, but that calculation is imperative. They thrive in structure, as I mentioned before, and like to do things the right way. This is the personality type that, even at a young age, will argue with authority when they think something is wrong and will continually bring new data to the table to prove their point. So, how do we parent that effectively? Let's talk about it. We're going to talk about a driven parent with an inquisitive child first, as we always do, going with the driven personality. I normally start with imbalanced parenting, but in this case, I'm changing up the situation because for the D parent, this child can be the most challenging because they challenge you with facts, facts, and more facts. And when they think they're right, which is honestly most of the time, they are tenacious about it. The D parent tends to be large and in charge, and when that authority is challenged, they do not like it one bit. The tendency with the D parent is to counterattack, but with the cautious, inquisitive child, that can backfire big time because when a cautious child feels attacked, they withdraw and can shut down. And getting them to open up again can take days, weeks, or even months. And if trust is broken in the process, it may never come back. That's not to say that the driven parent and inquisitive, cautious child can't have a great relationship, because they absolutely can. Starting with the fact that the C child loving details that can escape the driven parent can be such a bonus. It gives the inquisitive child the opportunity to share knowledge with their parent, and nothing makes them happier than sharing knowledge and being appreciated for that. Yes, you may have to stem the flow of information at some point because the C child may have more information than you need or want as a driven parent. But when you put parameters on the C child, make sure that you appreciate their effort and their output because both are important to the inquisitive child. For the D parent, when you have to discipline the inquisitive child or tell them no, be prepared to explain why. Yes, you are the parent, but using "because I said so" or issuing an ultimatum as reason enough for your decision is not enough for this child, and it can turn into deep resentment. I cannot tell you the number of times I had to explain to my children why they needed to brush their teeth and go to bed. And I'm still not sure the message got through. But you do what you can, right? And again, I understand that if you're the parent, that's hard to do. But when you understand your inquisitive child needs that information to feel safe and secure, it's easier to understand that they're asking questions to find safety and security, not necessarily to just challenge your authority. For an inspired parent, you share some of the same challenges as the driven parent because details are not your forte either. But you can turn fact finding into a game. And that can serve both you and your inquisitive child well because You can be genuinely excited about the information your child finds as long as the discussion doesn't get too far into the minutia of whatever subject you're researching, because at some point, you know you're going to stop listening. My youngest son is deeply into gaming and spends hours listening to informative videos on YouTube. At one time, we worried about how much time he did that, but what we've come to understand is that he uses YouTube as a tool to understand gaming and so many other things. Recently, he made a batch of chocolate chip cookies, and not only did he research the recipe, he researched the science behind the ingredients and why they were combined at certain amounts. He also found a recipe where he made the dough one day and cooked them the next day. And he loved that because it didn't take up too much of his day. And he's fairly new to cooking, so that kept the overwhelm at bay while he's learning so much about cookie baking and combining ingredients. Remember earlier when I talked about rotating toys for my children? During that process, I learned a couple of really cool things. One of the cool things I learned is that when you have fewer toys, your children find it easier to play with everything and truly enjoy themselves. Another thing I learned is that toys are much easier to manage when there aren't so many of them. And you can create a simple cleanup routine that keeps children from being overwhelmed. I learned that nearly all children thrive from at least some level of routine and order. But for the cautious, inquisitive child, it's absolutely necessary for them to thrive. As a free spirit mom, that was very difficult at first. Very difficult. But even I started to thrive from having a balance of routine and free time to take care of business and to have fun as well. And when I say routine, I don't mean hours of routines that made me want to scream and run away from home. It merely meant a few minutes in the morning and a few minutes in the evening to set myself and my family up for success, followed by fun. Pretty cool, huh? For the supportive parent, you love to nurture. And this child is not a child that necessarily enjoys that. If they tend more towards the driven side, they will avoid your hugs and snuggles, even as babies. If they tend more toward the supportive side, they'll enjoy your nurturing, but only on their own terms. I've talked before about what it was like to be a happy, people oriented morning person in a home full of task oriented, non morning people. And I'm so glad I learned that my children and husband needed me to tone that part of myself down in the morning when all they wanted to do was quietly get to work and school. During the summer, my kids would often read in bed in the morning to give themselves some extra time before facing their very happy mom. When they took that time, they were ready to ease into the day, which usually consisted of 15 minutes of tidying up the house and then doing something fun. We often went to the library, the park, the zoo, the local amusement park, or swimming with some of our favorite people. And then after the fun time, my children would generally head for their bedrooms again for a bit of quiet time to decompress before dinner, so they could be social at the table. As someone who loves to be social, I had to learn that my children needed that downtime to recharge after social time. Whereas I was supercharged after having fun and spending time with my favorite people. And my youngest, who still lives with us, will occasionally ask if we mind if he eats dinner in his room, even when he isn't hanging out with friends online. I'm so glad I learned about this because to this day, there are cautious types of people that I'm friends with that introduce me as their one outgoing friend because I'm fine with them disappearing when they've had enough social time. I just ask that they tell me or text me so I know not to look for them if we're at a social occasion and I'm leaving. If you're a supportive parent that has some of the cautious personality in your mix, you and your child would do best to create a list of rules, house rules that you both agree on, including the consequences for not following the rules. That's going to keep both of you accountable and take the emotion out of enforcing the rules because They're printed out and agreed upon. It helps the supportive parent enforce the rules, and it helps the inquisitive child to have a set of rules that isn't based on how their parent is feeling that day, which makes them feel safe and secure. Now, let's talk about the cautious personality parenting the inquisitive, cautious child. This can be a really interesting dynamic for sure. You both like to deep dive into subjects, and when you share interests, it can be the best of times. I know a mother daughter duo that love to sew, and they bond over everything from purses to quilts and all the ways to make them. I know a grandmother and grandson duo that love baseball and can chat about players and stats for hours. I have two sons that can talk about gaming and politics for days and connect at least weekly online. In a parent child duo, it's extremely helpful to find something that you have in common to talk about because it will create a deep bond so that when you find things that each of you are interested in that the other might not be, you don't frustrate each other with the subject that one has an interest in and the other doesn't. In my case, my youngest has as I said, a deep interest in gaming. He also has a deep interest in anime. I have little to no interest in it, but my son loves it. So I know more about certain games and anime than I would ever care to know. My son knows that I don't love the things he loves, but I love him. So I listen while I'm doing other things so that we can have that bond. And now that he's learning about cooking and baking, we're deep diving into that, which is something I can definitely enjoy more. But again, as that more people-oriented person, I really don't care why we use certain amounts of certain ingredients. And my years of experience with cooking let me experiment and substitute at will rather than having to look things up at this point. On occasion, though, it's nice to have, the conversation about why we use certain ingredients as a substitute, like me having to substitute for avocado because I'm allergic. The other thing that the cautious parent and a cautious, inquisitive child need to be aware of is how to structure the household. As I mentioned before, the cautious child, like the cautious parent, needs information to feel safe and secure. When rules are set, it helps immensely to explain why each rule exists because you both love to live by the rules. So if you agree on the rules, life will be so much better for everyone involved. If your child doesn't agree with your rules, you may have a mutiny on your hands, especially if you have multiple children and they have leadership skills. As I said with the driven parent, you are most definitely the parent here, and you can do what you want. But if you want a peaceful household that runs smoothly, and as a cautious parent, I know that's what you want, it behooves you and your child to have a discussion about the rules and have them agree to the terms of the rules and the consequences if the rules are broken. It speaks to both of your needs to have as many details as possible in place and can be yet another bonding experience to create the rules and the consequences together. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. So we've come to the end of this series about the complexity of parent and child personalities. Did you see yourself in one of these situations? If you're like most people, you've seen yourself in several of them, and you might be wondering how to deal with your own child or children. That's why I suggest that everyone get a personality assessment. There are multiple versions of the assessments for adults, children, and teens, and if that sounds like a lot, it can be overwhelming, which is why I suggest that you book a discovery call with me so we can figure out what the best plan would be for you moving forward. You may have a question that we can solve in that conversation. We might schedule something more, but I assure you that whatever we chat about, you'll have some next steps to improve your relationship with your inquisitive, cautious child, no matter what age they are. So, go to the Moving Toward Better homepage and sign up for your discovery call now, and let's chat soon. As always, if you like what you've heard, please share and subscribe. Until next time, keep moving toward better, whatever that looks like for you. Love you all. Bye-bye. At Moving Toward Better, it's our mission to help you unlock a fantastic life, powered by what's unique and authentically you. To learn how we can help you in your quest, head over to movingtowardbetter.com to check it out, or use the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being you, and have a great day. Love you all.